We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the troubling trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Open Mind channel. Imagine turning on a TV, picking up a newspaper or listening to the radio, trusting that what you are hearing is the absolute truth. But what if I told you the government planted those stories? In the years following World War II, a covert CIA program known as Operation Mockingbird set out to sway public opinion and control the narrative of every story. Today we are diving into the history, long-lasting impact of this secret operation and its relevance within the modern day, setting the stage for post-World War II America and the CIA. The end of World War II marked the beginning of a tense and dangerous time within global politics, better known as the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, locked in a battle of ideologies between capitalism and communism. This ideological war was fueled by speculation, espionage, and propaganda on both sides. In 1947, President Harry Truman signed the National Securities Act, establishing the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA. The CIA's mission was simple: gather intelligence and safeguard American interests abroad, but it quickly expanded into covert actions and psychological operation. One of the CIA's early strategies was to influence the media, both at home and internationally. This would eventually become known as Operation Mockingbird. How Operation Mockingbird works. Operation Mockingbird was officially launched in the 1940s at the dawn of the Cold War, when the United States government was intensely focused on controlling narratives at home and abroad. The operation was reportedly led by Frank Wisner, a senior CIA official who had a grand vision. Wisner's goal was to create what he called a mighty Wurlitzer, a media machine that could play at any tune that the CIA needed it to, influencing public opinion and steering narratives in ways that would support the US's interests. At its height, Operation Mockingbird recruited journalists from some of the most influential news outlets in the country. The operation targeted both high-profile publications like the Washington Post, New York Times, and Time magazine, and also broadcast giants like CBS and ABC. These media companies shaped how Americans understood events from local news to international conflicts, and the CIA saw an opportunity to use this influence as a powerful weapon. Some journalists worked knowingly with the CIA, often accepting direct payments from them. This wasn't simply a freelance agreement for many, it became a regular part of their careers. Their job was to shape, cover, and sometimes plant stories directly given to them by the CIA agents. This would often involve presenting events in light that supported the US government's interests. In return, these journalists were well compensated and were sometimes given inside information which made them appear more credible and authoritative in the space of journalism. Other journalists were less aware of the direct manipulation that was happening. They may not have also been on the CIA's payroll, but they received information or leaks from what they consider to be reputable government sources. The CIA often framed these tips as essential insights, using them to push their stories and the ones that they clearly wanted to be published. For instance, during the height of anti-communism sentiment, the CIA would leak stories and portray communist leaders as dangerous and unstable.
Listen, Mr. Merrill, I want to know how many communists you knew. I want to know how many you know. I want to know.
Feeding into the public's fear of communism and justifying government action abroad. Editors and publishers were also key targets. In some cases, high-ranking editors were under direct pressure to suppress stories that didn't align with the CIA's interests or risked exposing what the CIA was doing. The CIA would remind these editors of their patriotic duty. In many cases, they complied, seeing it as a way to contribute to national security by aligning with the operation and the American interests. Mockingbird fostered a sense of obligation and loyalty among media professionals. One of the operation's strategies was to deploy a multiplier effect. When a story was planted in one major publication, other outlets would pick it up and run it as well, often without questioning its validity or verifying the facts. This amplification created a media echo chamber that could quickly normalize certain perspectives, establishing around controversial topics like the US involvement in foreign conflicts. Through Mockingbird, the CIA effectively controlled a narrative that reached millions of Americans. Operation Mockingbird's success depended heavily on censorship. To maintain obtain this, the CIA created front organizations like the National Committee for Free Europe, which was funded through various media outlets under the idea of promoting democracy. This misdirection allowed the CIA to operate without raising too many questions. Mockingbird's reach was vast and its influence was subtle but very powerful. By placing stories, suppressing information, and controlling the way foreign and domestic events were portrayed, the operation effectively turned American media into an instrument of psychological warfare. For the CIA media, control was not about reporting the news, it was about shaping the news and its perspectives. Mockingbird continued through the 1950s and 60s, but it wasn't until the 1970s when the public's trust in government began to erode. The details of the operation began to surface, and the public would soon learn that the press they trusted to be free and independent had in many cases been influenced by the government that it was supposed to keep in check. Let's discuss another influential figure in Operation Mockingbird, known as Philip Graham, the influential publisher of the Washington Post. Graham, a Harvard law graduate and a former officer in the U.S. Army Air Force, was a very anti-communist individual. To him, the threat of communism wasn't just ideological, he saw it as a direct danger to American values and freedom. Graham believed that in the context of the ideological war, supporting the CIA's efforts to fight communism was his patriotic duty. His close relationship with the CIA granted him and the agency unprecedented access to the Washington Post editorial direction. Through his influence, the paper became not just a participant in this, but a central part in this operation. Under Graham's leadership, the Washington Post did more than report the news. It crafted narratives that aligned with the CIA's interests. For instance, the paper would often publish stories that emphasized the dangers of communism or justified every intervention that the U.S. would take abroad. In exchange, Graham was given access to high-level information and exclusive stories. Wisner's and Graham's alliance was crucial for the success of Operation Mockingbird. Wisner's connection allowed him to extend his reach beyond the Washington Post to other major media organizations with the help of Graham and others in the media industry. Wisner's established ties with editors and all the previous organizations that we mentioned earlier. These connections allowed him to build a vast network of individuals who were willing to either knowingly or unknowingly further the CIA's interest. In the 1950s and 60s, Mockingbird's influence was particularly evident in the coverage of significant events like the Korean War and the Bay of Pigs invasion. The Korean War was often described as America's first hot war against communism and was portrayed in the media as a critical stance against the spread of Soviet influence in Asia. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 provides another stark example. The CIA's backed attempt to overthrow the Cuban Communist government was highly sensitive in operation, and its failure was a significant blow to the US's credibility, but Mockingbird had the media downplay and framed the defeat in a way that preserved support for anti-communist policies. Now, let's discuss ethical concerns. Operation Mockingbird raised serious ethical questions about the role of free press in a democratic society. If the government could manipulate what you read, saw, and heard, was the press truly free? Could Americans trust their news? These concerns came to a head in the 1970s after public revelations about Mockingbird and other CIA abuses. In response, Congress held a hearing known as the Church Committee Investigations to uncover and address the CIA's questionable tactics. The Freedoms of Information Act was also strengthened, allowing journalists and citizens to request government records, bringing greater transparency between the public and the CIA. Modern parallels with Operation Mockingbird. Although Operation Mockingbird has technically ended, it is important to note that in the modern day of media, to be more thoughtful of what you read and research and hear. Now more than ever, with there being the internet where information comes from like 1,000 different sources, being educated on this topic will ensure your safety and interest as an individual in what you read and what you believe. I wanted to end off this video by asking you a question. Do you think the media is still vulnerable to influence as it is in the 1950s, or do you think we have learned from the past? If you've also made it this far into the video, I'd like to thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, take care.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
It was all bullshit.
I had one beer, right? I had one beer.